You need to know when to prioritize the details, and you need to know when to prioritize the big picture. Learning how to give feedback, that is leverage. And if you're micromanaging, you're going to be unable to do that effectively. That is really what is on management and leadership to do.
What are the key principles that have guided your leadership style throughout your career?
The number one thing for me in leadership is to hire highly competent and highly motivated people and then put them in positions that allow them to thrive. I have worked with tons of unmotivated people. I've worked with incompetent people. If you're not highly motivated and highly competent, then there needs to be a lot more structure and framework and effort from management and leadership to making those people effective. And that's not the type of people I'm interested in working with or the type of organization I'm interested in building. So for me, it's always been hire highly motivated, highly competent people, put them in a position to thrive. And that last part, put them in a position to thrive, that is really what is on management and leadership to do. And a lot of that has to do with setting clear goals, giving people the right access to information, and building processes and frameworks to allow people to understand how they are doing at achieving those goals and access the information that they need to achieve them. That's something that, even though I always had that philosophy, it took a couple experiences to learn why it's so important. And I've really shifted my hiring and management towards, I would way rather work with a more junior person who has potential than a more senior person who has the experience but lacks the same level of motivation. Because at the end of the day, you can learn skills, you can learn frameworks, you can learn, experience is learned, but you can't learn an approach. And if you're not motivated, that's not a learned thing. That's not something that I can instill in someone. Obviously to a degree, right? You can inspire people, but if people are phoning it in, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter how much experience they have. The people who have a growth mindset, who wake up every day and want to contribute to their highest, who want to grow personally, who want to help the organization that they're a part of grow, that is the thing that matters the most. And experience is very secondary to that.
In your opinion, what is one fault that you cannot have in order to be a successful leader?
So I'm going to answer that and then immediately make a conflicting statement. The number one thing you can't do to be a successful leader is to be a micromanager. Successful leadership is about scale and leverage. The reason that the CEOs of massive companies like Microsoft or Google or OpenAI are so valuable isn't because of what they do every day. It's because of the goals that they set. They drive the work of tens, hundreds of thousands of people. Google, at least before its layoffs, had 170,000 people. So their CEO is driving the daily work of 170,000 people. That is leverage. That is how you create and drive value way beyond what you can do as an individual, is by setting effective goals for other people who are reporting up to you. And if you're micromanaging, you're going to be unable to do that effectively. So the number one thing that you see first-time managers struggle with, every single one, I struggled with it, every single first-time manager in the world struggles with this, is letting go of them as an individual contributor and accepting their new role as someone who is setting goals, unblocking obstacles, sharing information, doing the things to set up others to succeed. And you hear this all the time from first-time managers. Well, if I just went and did it, I'd do it faster and it would be more correct. And it's yeah, that's probably true. That's probably why you were put in a position of management, is because you are a very high-level individual contributor, but you can only do the work of one person. Whereas if you're coaching and you're helping share information and oversee goals and things like that, now all of a sudden, as even a first-line manager, you can oversee and help drive the work of 6 to 8 people. As a director, right, you have 6 to 8 people reporting to you. With 6 to 8 people reporting to them, you get whatever that is, in the 40s to 60s level of people's work who you're helping to direct. And that's how you start to develop against leverage and scale. And if you need to be in the weeds on every single little thing, you are never going to get past managing 2 to 3 people effectively at most. Now, at the same time, I'm going to make a conflicting statement, which is one of my favorite quotes from Bob Iger's book, Ride of a Lifetime, which is micromanagement is underrated. You do need to know when to step down and get involved in the details, because you need to know what details really matter. And so that is something that really good leaders do, is they understand when they need to operate on the high level and they understand when they need to be down in the trenches making very detailed decisions, and they can operate and switch between those two modes very quickly. You should spend the majority of your time operating at a high level, driving goals, giving people feedback, passing around information. But you should know when a detail needs your full attention and when it is time to micromanage. And that's what the best leaders do effectively.
So how long did it take you from being a first-time manager, and because I think you and I have had this conversation about if I just do it myself, it'll be better. So how long did it take?
I've had that conversation with every single person I have ever put into their first leadership position. But yeah.
How long did it take you from that mindset to switching over to letting go? What's that time frame?
I personally got extremely lucky as a first-time manager in that I was put in a situation where the majority of people I was managing were more senior than me at the role. I was overseeing an engineering team. Specifically, I was a back-end engineer and started overseeing the front-end engineering team and had 3 to 4 people who were really senior, like way more senior than I was. And so I didn't have a choice because I couldn't have better opinions than them. And I knew that. A lot of the stuff I didn't even really know about that they were discussing. And so that really forced me to lean on people and not get involved and know who on the team's opinion I trusted and lean on them and their opinion and their feedback to help drive decisions and get involved when I needed to and let the team, run with things when I didn't. That being said, I'd say for a first time manager, I think it's typically, it's on the order of months. For sure, maybe 6 months. And I think a lot of it comes down to also the burden that is placed on that person, because the more work someone has, the less able they are to dive down into the details on everything. One of the hardest positions that someone can be put in is a team lead position, where they're overseeing 2 to 3 people, but they're still expected to be spending half their time as an individual contributor, because then they are in the weeds every day and they're expected to be in the weeds, but they're also expected to be overseeing the work of these people. And then it's very easy for that half time that they're supposed to be spending as an individual contributor to just be spent redoing other people's work. But I would say generally you're seeing a 3 to 6 month time frame for someone to really let go of the work. And that's if they're focused on it. I've been managing people for 8-9 years, something like that. I still struggle with it sometimes. I still definitely struggle with the okay, is this something that requires me to be a micromanager? Is this something that requires me to get really into the details? Or am I sweating the small things and I should go focus on something else? The hardest thing in life, the hardest thing in business is prioritization. And management has the same problem where you need to know when to prioritize the details and you need to know when to prioritize the big picture. No one gets it 100% right. It's not a science, but the best leaders get it right far more than they get it wrong.
In your opinion, what is the most overrated quality in leadership and what is the most underrated?
I don't even know if it's overrated because I don't think a lot of people will tell you that this is necessarily a great quality. But one thing that people try to do, which I think can really detract from them as leaders, is trying to be nice. Being nice can be an extremely toxic organizational trait because at the end of the day, it's a group of people who come together to accomplish a common goal. Everyone has a role in accomplishing that goal. And if someone is falling short of their role, they need to know that. And they need to know how they're expected to improve. And if they are unable to improve, they need to be transitioned out so that the overall organization, all the other people are being properly supported in their pursuit of that shared goal. And when you end up with cultures and leaders who prefer to be nice and sweep things under the rug and pretend everything's okay when it's not, that can turn pretty toxic because you end up with everyone knowing who isn't showing up, who isn't helping, and who is dragging the organization down, and no one addressing it. Learning how to give feedback, learning when you need to kind of pull the ripcord, learning what it takes to give someone an opportunity to improve, but also to make the decision when they're not living up to that opportunity and you need to make more drastic action. Those are really good qualities of good leaders, and it's a hard thing to do. I'm sure there's some people who enjoy it, but it's always been a hard thing to do for me because I want to be nice to everyone. But at some point, that's not the job. Yeah, for the most underrated, I already talked about this a bit, but I do think micromanagement is underrated. Micromanagement is like this dirty word that people use to talk about the most horrible bosses and all of that. And sometimes there's a reason that that person is in charge and they need to make decisions that you're not gonna like and you're not gonna agree with, but it's because they have more experience, they have more context, they are in that position for a reason a lot of the times, and it's their call. And sometimes you need to micromanage to focus on the right details and to make sure that the project, the company, that the whatever you're working on is going to accomplish the goal you're setting out to accomplish. And so micromanagement just becomes such it's like a swear word in a business setting, but sometimes you need to micromanage to ensure that things are done correctly, on time, and you're going to extract the business value out of the effort.
When it comes to giving your team feedback, how do you go about doing that without micromanaging?
One of my favorite tactics for leading without micromanaging is working with people to understand what their goals are. And depending on the level of seniority of person, right? If you're working like a VP of sales, their goals are going to be quarterly revenue goals that ladder up to a year-long revenue goal, right? Their goals are very high level, very strategic, and they should go figure out how to execute on that. If you're working with a junior software developer, their goal might be to write a function and write the unit test for that function in such a way that it passes the code review and gets into the code base. If you're working with a junior email copywriter, their goal might be to write copy that passes internal review, whereas a more senior one is writing copy that passes client review. Working with people on goals that are appropriate for their skill set and level of experience. And then one of the things I love to do is letting people set their own timelines for those goals. Sometimes there are external factors that don't allow for that, but most of the time timelines are made up. And so asking people, when are you going to have this done by, is a way that allows them to create the time-bound framework for their work. And it also gives you as a manager the opportunity to 2/3 of the way through that, check in and say, hey, are we still on track for this timeline that you set? That's how I like to approach most of the goal setting and time bounding aspects of management and leadership, is working with people to understand what their list of goals and priorities are, asking them to set timelines for those goals and priorities, and then checking in along those timelines to make sure that it's tracking to hit the goal by the due date. And if it isn't, then starting to intervene. You hear a lot of people complain that they've been given too tight of timelines for too many things that are unrealistic, and their feet are being held to the fire for bullshit deadlines that someone else made up that were never realistic to start with. And so that's why I like to give people the opportunity to set their own deadlines, because it gives them autonomy in deciding what's realistic. And it also, I think, leads to higher levels of accountability. Because if you said you could get it done by Friday and it isn't done by Friday, we don't really have any excuses.
What is your personal feedback philosophy?
So when I was working for other people, I was a lot more flexible in the way that I provided feedback, because when you're working in a big organization working for someone else, you can influence hiring, but you don't directly make the decision of what the company culture is going to be. It's obviously a lot more collaborative, and it comes down from on high. And so I've really adjusted to a feedback style that I would say really prioritizes being timely and being direct. I like to do it in person on a video call as much as possible, but written if required. What I've learned is there are people who don't work well with that. And I made a decision at some point that that's fine. The point of having a culture, the point of having a leadership style is not to have one that fits every person in every circumstance, is to have one that allows people that are going to work well in those situations and under those styles to opt in, and allow people who aren't going to work well under that style of leadership in that style of culture to opt out. And so a big part for me is being direct and timely in feedback. I don't like to mince words too much. Obviously, I try to be, try not to be an asshole, but try to give people direct feedback that they can act on. That has definitely limited the people I can work with to people who, first of all, have a growth mindset, they want to get better. And second of all, have a level of grit. You have to have some level of thick skin to want to take direct, timely feedback that might be synchronous. Whereas I've worked with people in the past that are I do not want direct feedback. I want you to sandwich it between two nice things, and I want you to write it in an email so I can have a week to digest it before we discuss it, which to each their own, but I've just realized that that's not a style that really works for me, and have really oriented towards people who are willing to work with a direct feedback sell.